investigator John Bryce from the Luray Police Department, who has 35 years of experience in law enforcement. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of methamphetamine?
Methamphetamine was originally created in Japan in 1918. Saw very little use initially. Made a big rise during World War II, and the Japanese actually used it to give to their kamikaze pilots, large doses of it.
Could you explain some of the patterns of use today in society? Does it appear to be on the rise?
Meth, I think particularly in the valley in this area, is probably the drug of choice, and it is on the rise. And it's on the rise because the substances used to make it are all readily available. The only item in this production that is controlled at all is the pseudoephedrine, which has to be signed for. Producers of methamphetamine will use people that they call Smurfs. They send Smurfs out to buy for them. And that way they spread it out, and you'll have different people who will buy the Sudafed for them and other ingredients. And then they'll give them a cut of the end product.
Could you explain some of the other ingredients that go into the production?
Well, there's a number of ingredients, and they're different mixtures that they'll use. A recent meth case we had here in the town of Luray, some of the items that were confiscated, as you can see in this photograph, we've got crystal drain cleaner, lighter fluid, Coleman fuel, muriatic acid, isopropyl alcohol, coal pack, pseudoephedrine, lithium strips out of lithium batteries. That's, just a sample of some of the items can be used.
And what are some of the toxicities that arise from this production?
Well, all of the materials used, have common household uses, but when they're mixed together, they can become highly volatile. Meth labs are known to explode. A lot of times when a mash is being cooked, it will explode, cause chemical burns. People who produce it wear respirators, protective gear, and then after a while, sometimes they don't even do that, but you can have terrible chemical burns from the explosions, even burned lung.
Could you explain some of the crimes that you have experienced or witnessed or heard about from users of methamphetamine?
Crimes that I've dealt with where we've had people high on meth, they range anywhere from petty larceny to capital murder. Petty larceny being the most common, because typically the user is doing whatever they can to support their habit.
What are some of the behaviors you've seen from those under the influence of methamphetamine at time of the arrest?
Interviews with meth addicts that we've caught primarily describe being up for long periods of time, as much as 96 hours, at which point they experience psychosis. An individual I'll refer to as Sean S. was a one-man crime spree in the town of Luray from November 2012 through December 2012 when we finally caught him. We had as many as, I believe, 28 victims. We were able to connect him to 13 of the crimes, and they range from petty larceny to an armed robbery. He committed an armed robbery actually with the pistol he stole out of a vehicle. And at the time we interviewed him, people told him later from flyers that we put out that, hey Sean, we think you committed this crime. He didn't even remember it at the time. We actually tied him in and convicted him through DNA.
Methamphetamine affects dopamine, the brain's pleasure chemical, which is responsible for making experiences rewarding. Naturally, dopamine is released into the synapse, where it binds to the postsynaptic cell receptor and is then taken back up at the reuptake site on the presynaptic neuron. When meth enters the brain through the bloodstream, causes dopamine to leak from the neuron into the synapse, making an excess. It then blocks the reuptake, leaving even more dopamine present in the synapse to bind with receptors. So why does meth have such a high potential for abuse? Because it can be transformed into a free base form called ice, which is then inhaled through smoking. The effects are almost instantaneous, which causes a very strong link between the stimuli, meth, and the reward, the high. Meth has very similar effects to crack cocaine, but there are some differences. Cocaine is derived from a plant, while meth is synthetic or man-made. Cocaine delivers a brief high, while meth's high is much longer. With coke, 50% of the drug is gone from the bloodstream within an hour, while 50% of meth is gone in 12 hours. Meth has both physical and psychological effects. The physical effects include wakefulness, hyperactivity, increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, heightened body temperature, and twitching and/or tweaking. The psychological effects include euphoria, hallucinations, psychosis, reduced fatigue, increased sense of well-being, and increased alertness. These are just the intended effects of methamphetamine. Meth also has a number of side effects that are potentially toxic and lethal.
The long-term or toxic effects of meth include damage to the brain that is similar to Alzheimer's disease, epilepsy, psychosis, depression, disorientation, apathy, or confused exhaustion are all effects meth has on the brain due to the changes it causes in the brain's synapses. Weight loss due to suppressed appetite, damage to the tissue in the nose if it is snorted, skin infections due to meth users obsessively picking at their skin or using non-sterile needles, chemical burns, tooth decay, also called meth mouth, are all seen with its use. Meth also damages the liver and kidneys and can lead to difficulty in breathing due to its damaging effects on the lungs. Weakening of blood vessels can lead to stroke, and damage to the heart is caused by heart attacks and the constant stress put on the heart from the heavy workload of having to pump blood through constricted blood vessels.
If you have a hardcore meth addict, they're headed in two directions. You may recover from it one time. You get back involved in a second time, you're pretty much done. Recovery is going to take place in prison. A meth addict's going to go down two roads, one of which is prison, the other is death. And that's pretty much the way it is.